Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Caring Well. Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well.
Welcome to Caring Well, a Middleton Pediatrics podcast where we have conversations to help you care well for your child. This episode is part 3 in a 3-part series on vaccines. Sara Pate joins me again to continue this conversation. If you would like to go back and watch episodes 1 and 2, you can find the links in the description of this episode. So now let's go to that conversation.
All right, Dr. Middleton, we made it. Episode 3, vaccine series. Just really quick for our viewers, just want to recap. Episode 1, we talked about some myths, vaccine myths, and just common misconceptions. And then episode 2, we went through safety. And we'll kind of touch on that a little bit tonight, but tonight we're going to talk about schedule. I think of all the questions that I get in the office, I think most of them pertain to schedule. Like the majority pertain to schedule. And just why is the schedule the way it is? Is there wiggle room? If so, if not, why not? So let's talk about vaccine schedule. What do you want us to know?
The AAP has been, the American Academy of Pediatrics has been putting out a recommended childhood vaccine schedule at 90 years
Like
or something.
years
I
and
mean,
years,
a long time. And then the CDC was formed. They also put out a schedule. And for quite a while, the schedules would potentially be slightly different. And so there was really an effort.
The AAP and the CDC
Correct.
schedule a little bit different.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of these vaccines were emerging and there were a lot of issues. And so it just like anything that's sort of trailblazing, this kind of both science and policy were happening in real time. And so what happened was they ended up saying, for the sake of clarity, we need to formalize a consistent.
Get on the same schedule.
Yeah,
Right.
literally get on the same schedule. And so that happened, and that's been the case for the last, say, 30 years or so.
Okay.
So the schedule, at least to date, has been a joint effort of the CDC, AAP, and I think the American Family Physicians as well, that there's a coming together of clinical minds to say what is the best recommended schedule.
And there is some wiggle room in the sense of like 4-year-old shots can be maybe 4 to 5. So it's not like on this exact date you have to get it. But overall, there's just this recommended schedule of within this time frame. These are the ones that you need.
Yeah.
Correct?
And the factors that go into that are so many. So a lot of what impacts the schedule is what is the disease burden of the vaccine that's being recommended. So a good example is Hib, Haemophilus influenza B, which is when I was in high school, when I was in college even, just a terrible disease that would cause devastating outcomes. And so really scary for both parents and pediatricians. When I was training as a pediatrician, the doctors I was learning from, they still spoke of the horror of Hib, meningitis and sepsis and epiglottitis and anyway, so many things. But it's a disease primarily in kids under 2. And so the schedule.
That kind of influences the recommendation and
Yeah,
schedule.
I mean,
right?
immunizing kids at 4 for Hib would be useless. And I mean, that's a kind of a mundane example, but that's true of all these things, that a lot of the reason it's done when it's done is because of the disease burden.
I often hear parents in the office that say, it's not that I'm against vaccinating my child. Can we just go slower? Can we just do, it's too much too soon. I would just feel better if we did one at a time. Or if there's this magic number of 12 months that I hear often of like, can we just wait until they're a year? I feel like when I ask questions about, can you tell me why? You know, what have you heard? I haven't gotten a good answer of like, you know, I've seen this study or that study. It just seems like this fear almost of there's so little. It seems like a lot. And I hear all these other, you know, things on social media. Can we just take it slow? How do you respond to that?
First response would be, it is a lot. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of vaccines. And I think there's ways to sort of unpack that. I think a starting point would be the vaccine schedule as it currently is has been really well studied. and found to be safe. And so there's that. There's the idea of if someone is talking, you could almost look at it as, are you saying it's a lot in terms of the number of pokes, the number of diseases we're preventing, or the number of antigens?
I would guess that probably primarily it's you're putting a lot into my baby's body. They're so little and young. Their immune system is going to be overwhelmed. That would be first what I think I get from parents. And then second would be, it's just so many shots.
Yeah.
Like they're tiny. Why are we stabbing them with
Yeah. So
five
again,
needles?
the wording matters. So when people say, I'm not against vaccines, I'm just against too much at one time. I would say, I'm against too much at one time. I mean, but to just say that is sort of arousing a fear without any basis for what is too much at one time type of thing. Same type of thing to use the word overwhelm, right? Well, of course, I don't want anything to overwhelm my kid, that any aspect of my kid. If you're overwhelming them, it's by the term, you're kind of making it seem harmful. And so I think if you're talking about the number of what you're putting on the immune system, let me just say a couple things that are maybe in not a articulate order, but it just as they come to mind. The idea of overwhelming their immune system, if in some ways that would be a really easy thing to study, and it has been in the sense that kids that get the vaccines as recommended, do they tend to either in the short term right after or even longer term, do they tend to catch a lot more diseases? Has that immune system been so hammered that it's now susceptible? And it's not only is it not true, it's probably the opposite, that they even catch less of the things that aren't even being vaccinated against. And so there's no evidence that the immune system is being overwhelmed, quite the contrary. And not to mention what has been said so many times about the exposure that baby's immune system is getting from all these other environments.
So can you quantify that? Like as a parent, that helps me. As a mom, that just helps me to know, like, okay, if my baby goes to daycare or my dog licks their face or they rub their face in the carpet on tummy time, like they're getting exposed to so many things. Just like quantify that in terms of those exposures versus a vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to put numbers on things like being licked by your dog or, the pacifier drops on the floor and you put it back in the mouth.
But that stuff happens
like
all the time. We don't think twice about it.
Correct.
Right?
Or even, the exposure through the birth canal and all these things. I think one way to think about it, if you think, again, at the risk of getting nerdy, if you're thinking of most of the time when I ask parents, what is it about this too much at one time you're concerned about? Is it the shots? They really, even if they don't use that term, it's the antigens. It's the things that are stimulating the immune system. And so just going back to, I think what we talked about in the first episode, that an antigen is the part that prompts the immune response. And so when I was a child, I probably got immunized against 5 to 7 diseases. So diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, polio, and then MMR, measles, mumps, rubella came along during my childhood.
But less than what we get immunized for today.
Yeah, it's like 17 now.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so 7 diseases versus 17. That seems like a lot.
A lot, yeah.
But the antigens that I got exposed to were in the thousands.
Yeah.
And today, a child is getting a fraction of that. Probably
it's like 150 or something.
Yeah, 100,
right?
150.
With the total schedule.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's largely because of the whooping cough. The pertussis shot we got had thousands of antigens in it. And so I was getting much more hit my immune system than any child today. I mean, tenfold or 20-fold, whatever that is. And so when someone says, well, it's really the antigens we're worried about, oh, I got some great news for you. Your child is getting far less than children got 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever that is. More than that for myself. And so the idea of the immune system getting too much, it's gotten so much less than it was.
And just to clarify, so kids, all of us, but kids in particular, are exposed to antigens or every day.
Yeah, for sure.
So you think like the dog licking or the face in the carpet, we don't know numbers, but more than 150.
Yeah, and not only is that providing some, maybe relative comfort and, comparing it relative.
Yeah.
That's kind of what the immune system is built and needs to do.
But I think we missed that part, like just little things, like as a mom, and here in my mom groups, it's like even the word antigen, it seems like this is something scientific that you're putting in my kid's body, but that's a natural process that all of our bodies go through, regardless of being injected with a vaccine.
Yeah. I mean, if you looked at if you could somehow look under the hood of a baby,
right?
There's sort of two systems that are just ripe and primed to learn like crazy.
Ready to go. Mm-hmm.
And it's the brain and it's the immune system. And it is by design, it is ready and able, not just able, needing that stimulation to develop and learn. And it's dramatic and it's wonderful, right? And so that's true of the immune system. And antigens is just the thing that prompts those immune responses. Yeah. And so, we said in one of the early episodes that almost from the beginning of time, people realized that there were plenty of diseases that once you got, you were protected from. And that was sort of even before they knew what diseases were. And so the idea of worried about stimulating the immune system is like, that's what's supposed to happen. Anyway, so that's a little bit of the antigen thing. The shot thing, again, it can be a lot. That too is relatively less. I mean, there are people, based on whatever products people use, that there may be places where people are getting 5 shots at a visit. My kids did, but I mean, that doesn't happen a single visit in our office.
Right.
Ever.
I think a lot of times, at least now, those are more catch up, like if they're behind on vaccines or whatnot. I'm sure there are some offices where,
and that's fine. I mean, again,
totally.
My child did it and it's safe. It is, but it is tough on the kid. But they've even done studies where they look at, like if spacing out shots,
like the cortisol level.
Yeah. I mean, the stress on the child is now, it's not like this one got really reduced and it's like you have a bad episode and now you have another bad episode.
So it's like the stress hormone, cortisol, right? Whether you get 1 shot or 5, the level rises to here every time they get a poke. And so it's like by spreading it out, we're just doing that every time versus all at once.
So anyway, so thinking the antigens too much at one time, it's actually not. The shots, I mean, again, it's less than what it was for ours. But and then the other one that if someone says you were only 7 and now it's 17 diseases, and that one is the weirdest to me because that is something we all should be celebrating, and it's a little bit like if someone said, talking about like adult heart disease, like I don't know, I just don't feel good. It used to be just nitroglycerin, open heart bypass, and
these were the
death,
only options.
And now we got stents and medicines, and I just don't like all these options. And I'm like, okay, but people aren't dying of heart attacks like they used to.
Right.
And that's how vaccines. And so what a wonderful time to be having a child when there's 17 diseases that can be prevented as opposed to 7 or 5. Yeah. But again, as a parent, you have this natural God-given instinct to be protective. And so a lot of these, whether it be myths, misconceptions, or just totally understandable fears are coming out of that. Doesn't mean it's our fears are well-guided. They might be misguided, but that's where it's coming out of. Just this idea, everybody's trying to protect their child. And then others are coming along saying things that sort of prey on that.
And I feel like in every episode we've come back to, at the end of the day, it comes down to trust. Like you've got to put your trust in someone. And so where are you going to get trusted information?
Yeah. And that, I mean, you could even play that with the idea of alternative schedules, that it's a little ironic.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
That someone would choose to not do the schedule that has been studied.
It's crazy to me. Yeah.
And to do a schedule that hasn't been studied. That there's trust being put in something that has not been studied.
I think what I hear parents say is, again, it's just this, I guess when you feel fear, when we feel scared, the natural instinct is to slow down and to like kind of, take a minute and let me just kind of process. And so whether that's rational or irrational, it's, evidence-based, not, I think the natural inclination is to just, let me just take a step back. So I have these families again that are asking, can we just do one at a time? Can we do this alternate schedule? But with no real reason of, hey, we've seen all these evidence-based studies and this works well. It just comes from a place of fear. And so, yeah, I don't know. I feel bad. I would be cautious going somewhere where it's like, yeah, we want you to do this because I don't know, it just seems like flying a plane. So yeah, just do it however you want because, it'll probably turn out well. Like there's a reason that we're not the pilot, we don't have that training, that knowledge.
And if these diseases weren't real in the sense of real risks at certain ages, then there might not be a risk in delaying, even though you still would be subjecting yourself to a schedule that hasn't been studied. But the other part of it is there's diseases that are real and that are harmful to children that you are preventing, and they're done at a certain time. And so, yeah, I mean, would love for someone to listen and be able to just step back from things heard and put some degree of confidence in the way the schedule has come about, the reasons for it as far as the timing, and I fear that we could be in a situation where the only thing that sort of turns the tide in some ways is truly the reemergence of diseases, which, again, we talked about is already happening with a number of them, most notably whooping cough and measles, but especially whooping cough. Measles, for whatever reason, measles gets headlines. Headlines in our world. I don't know what other people's headlines look like.
I've had some people say, alternative vaccine schedules haven't been studied because no one will fund it. And, so how can you say that an alternative schedule maybe isn't better if it's never been studied? Like, how would you answer that?
In some ways, you could say that about everything. Everything, how do you know? Because if it hasn't been studied. So if someone wants to try to do something that hasn't been studied and say, but it could be, I guess. But that's the biggest thing I think it is not recognizing is the rigor with which this recommended schedule has been studied.
And the other variables too, like if you change the schedule and study an alternate schedule, how do you know that the outcome is because the schedule was different or because, with kids, there's so many other variables as well. So
yeah, they when new vaccines get introduced, they have to go through this concomitant use studies. They have to be studied alongside other existing vaccines to make sure that it's effective alongside these vaccines, that it doesn't decrease the effectiveness of the existing vaccines. Anytime you really study these things, you just tend to walk away thinking, wow, it is unbelievable the diligence that has gone into, the decades and the diligence that goes into these things. And so, we said before, anything, these blanket statements or things that are kind of quippy and bumper sticker type statements, it isn't giving the credit that is due to where we currently are.
Let's talk briefly about vaccine mandates.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about that?
If you think approved, recommended, required, I think that's a good way to think of it. If a vaccine is approved, that generally, this is in a little bit of flux, but that generally is the FDA that has reviewed the studies of a vaccine and said it is both safe and effective. But there are lots of vaccines that are approved that aren't recommended. We have a rabies vaccine. We have an anthrax vaccine. We have yellow fever and typhoid. But
that we're not giving regularly, routinely.
Yeah, they aren't
to kids
routinely recommended because even though they're safe and effective, it's not indicated or recommended for the general population because you're at such low risk. And so that's approval, FDA, and then there's recommended, which is has been a subcommittee of the CDC called the ACIP, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and they would look at approved vaccines and then determine if based on the disease burden and all those things, if it should be recommended. And then going back to your previous question, the CDC AAP childhood schedule would take the things that were recommended by the ACIP and put it into a schedule. So anyway, so you've got approval, recommended, and then required. Recommended is this diligent, nerdy, clinical process as far as what of these approved vaccines should be recommended, giving these clinical factors.
I think that's a huge step too that I don't want to skip over lightly, just as a parent, a mom, whatever it may be. I think that's a huge, it just gives me peace of mind in the sense of there's all these vaccines, but it's not like these organizations are saying they all need to be given to all kids. So there's some pickiness, if you will, of this is the vaccines. These are the vaccines that we need at these times. I mean, you could say everybody get a rabies vaccine, but that doesn't make sense clinically. And so I think that also just reassures parents that there's a reason to the madness, if you will,
Just because something's approved doesn't mean it's going to be recommended. There's lots of examples of that too. Approved, recommended, and required. Approved, FDA safety and effectiveness, recommended, clinical significance, and then required. That's a legislative process. That's sadly, it often isn't that clinical. It's who can get this bill passed or not get this bill passed. And so required means usually what it means is for school entry, basically, right? It's required to enter public school. And so there have been plenty of times in the office where someone would say, asking about a particular vaccine, and we would say, yes, I definitely think you should get this vaccine. And they'd say, actually, school doesn't require it. And you want to say that's a legislative process.
We don't base our recommendations off legislative processes.
Right, because that's just not putting my faith in that, right? I mean, we're basing it on clinical decisions. And so approved, recommended, required. Vaccine mandates are those that have been passed legislatively to be required for school entry. Okay. And so...
And those can differ between states.
They do differ by states, and because every state sets their own policy there.
But the recommendations from the CDC and AAP does not.
It's a great distinction. The CDC, AAP, so the recommendations from the ACIP, and then the childhood vaccination schedule, those are national organizations. But then required mandates, that's based on a state-by-state level. If you're talking about mandates, you need to talk about exemptions.
Right.
And really the way to think about exemptions is there are medical exemptions and non-medical exemptions. So medical exemptions, someone who should not get this vaccine, usually it's some degree of immunocompromised.
So the risk potentially could outweigh the benefits, maybe?
Yes, unequivocally. And that's people undergoing cancer treatments or people with inadequate immune systems. And so they could either not mount a response or potentially even worse. And then there's also people with a history of certain conditions that it's studied to say you should not. So that's a medical exemption. So there is no state nor any person I've ever heard of who ever thinks there shouldn't be medical exemptions. That's a given.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Non-medical exemptions is where the
little
debate,
gray area.
Yeah, and the debate and the controversy is. And so with non-medical exemptions, like Florida has philosophical exemptions and religious exemptions. And just like you said, that's a state-by-state thing. There are some states that only have medical exemptions. The majority of states have some non-medical exemption. We have both philosophical and religious. Effectively, it's not different, right? I mean, there's no...
Yeah, you can't really differentiate
Well, I
between
mean,
the two.
and the reality is, essentially, no organized religion is against vaccines. And so it's a little bit of really a misuse of the term, honestly. I mean, to claim a religious exemption, it's just another way of framing a philosophical exemption. Yeah. And so, and there, I guess you have to talk, we talked before about herd immunity, community immunity, and you're always going to have medical exemptions. And so there's going to be some percentage of the population that is not receiving a particular vaccine.
Right. Because they can't. They can't.
Yeah,
they're not
right.
eligible.
But from a disease control, public health point of view, that's okay because that number is so small.
Percentage of the group.
That's right. And the percentage of the population that can get it is enough to protect us all. And so it really is something you're doing for someone else. Now, that calculus changes dramatically when non-medical exemptions rise.
Okay, so talking about mandates, we've had a lot of news surrounding that, especially being in Florida. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
The state leadership has made some statements about wanting to get rid of all childhood vaccine mandates, to be the first state in the United States to get rid of vaccine mandates. And so some of that would need to be a legislative process. Some of it looks like can be done outside of that. And so it's really, it sort of is what feels like this potential dramatic step backwards for, I mean, decades of progress.
It certainly feels scary. You know, I can't imagine as a parent without, tons of medical knowledge that would come off as very scary.
The development of vaccines solely is not what has gotten rid of these diseases. It was mandates, meaning you can look at, this does not take a deep dive in our history. It's pretty easy. And so anyone that's not appreciating that just is either ignoring or just didn't look. But if like polio vaccine, significant improvement, but did not get rid of polio. Once it became a mandate, it was like 99% eliminated really, really, really quickly. And the same thing has happened with all these other things. And so there's an idea of just, if everyone just makes their own decision, that is naive, and history says it is. It's not even just an opinion. I mean, it's really clear from history that as great as that may sound to some, it doesn't
not reality.
work.
It doesn't work that way.
No, it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't even take into account the fact that for someone to say just making your own decision as if your own decision only affects you.
And not only affects healthy children, but children that, again, have medical exemptions, can't get vaccines or whatnot. It just feels like we have this responsibility to kind of love your neighbor, care for your neighbor,
right?
As a community. So
no, it is loving your neighbor. And I think I would wish, I almost wish someone like that's saying, I want to get rid of childhood vaccine mandates would say something along the lines of this idea, this perspective on individual freedoms is so important that we're okay with more children dying of pertussis.
Because that's essentially what we're saying, right?
No, or it may be tragic, but we're okay with thousands more cases of acquired deafness.
Right.
We're okay with, that is what is being said with.
But no one would ever say that,
No, that's not gonna sell a message, but and someone may, even if they heard that, say that's the freedoms that define whatever, and that may be, again, you kind of, with this issue, and this is what's been so difficult for I think anyone in pediatric community of late is this this convergence of politics, I would even say culture wars, and pediatric medicine that we've never experienced before. And I would think, of course, everyone wants to do whatever is necessary to protect kids. And but anyways, just that is the time where we are. And so anyway, so as far as how this will play out in our state, I mean, I don't know. It's a lot that we just have to wait and see. But
is there anything else you would say to parents that are worried, just in the sense of what do we do? Do we just wait? Is there anything to know?
Like, I would love for parents who care about this and who, meaning they care about the public good and keeping kids safe and things like that, to express that to your daycare, express that to your school. I mean, I would think those places would be in a difficult situation too, because they're running a business and they're worried about how this is going to play out. They want to keep kids safe. I mean, they've dedicated their professional time to children in one form or another, but I would want them to express to, hey, it's really important to me that that even if there's not a mandate, that there's some approach that you are having as a leadership that's going to keep my child safe. I think every place that cares for kids, whether it's a school or a daycare or whatever, should have to be transparent about their vaccination rates. That not sharing any individual information, but just
as a
I feel like if
unit.
someone else is going to choose to come there, they should know the potential risk. And it is just it's a relatively simple inverse relationship between vaccination rates and disease occurrence.
Right.
These diseases. And so the idea of I mean, we talked, I think, before about how when something like diphtheria, when the Soviet Union fell apart, I mean, I would think that to me feels a little bit like what I think a lot of people feel about polio, that, oh, but it's so far gone that it couldn't come back no matter what. And that was relatively recent history, and it did. So hope nobody wants these diseases to come back.
Certainly
I think
not.
a lot of people think that they won't, even with decreased vaccination rates, and I just don't know how you what the data or the history is to support that.
Yeah. Just so we make it abundantly clear for our patient families, we do not, correct me if I'm wrong, we do not make our recommendations. It doesn't change based off current legislative recommendations. So our recommendation for vaccines and our policy and all of that, we're not changing anything based off whether this mandate changes.
No, and that's been the case. Because, I mean, again, like I said, there are a number of things that have not been required for school entry that are well accepted and have been for decades part of the childhood immunization schedule. And so that's really nothing new there. Now, if something is not approved, that changes things. And that's what's going on right now with pediatric COVID vaccines. And so that's still to be played out, how that's gonna, and so, if things lose their approval somehow, that would change things. So, it's a weird time, and it's this confluence of, our world and Tallahassee or DC or whatever else. And that's not the world we're used to running around in.
What's the line between individualism and having autonomy versus there's these social contracts?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many aspects that we all sort of live by social contracts, whether that's, speed limits or smoking in public. And so, individual freedoms never exist in a vacuum. And so this is one that it seems so clear that what's better for a community. And the other thing that this is dealing with something that I get, that there are a lot of fears and a lot, we've talked before, that every parent's just wanting to do what they think is best for their child. And so it's fears. But the irony is this, uh, these are really unwarranted fears, not even unknowns. You could say, oh, these things are unproven. Actually, you can go way further than that. It's provenly safe. But again, there's there's so many things about, and vaccine myths and misconceptions are ripe for this, that sound so good when you hear it phrased a certain way. And I think definitely the idea of the parent's right to make a decision about what's best for their child, that resonates a little bit in all of us. And even the ethos of our country, you just say the word freedom and it just resonates. I mean, that's so much in the formation of our country, but these decisions definitely affect others. There's some distrust of government that's been escalating since COVID. There's the internet, and so therefore easy amplification and proliferation of things that really don't have good basis. And then there's also an era that I think extends way beyond this topic, that is this idea of really intensive parenting. And so it manifests with things as it relates to school and college admissions and play groups. I mean, an older generation, I'm saying older than myself, but maybe I am the older generation, but looks at so much of and just the amount of intensity with which, and again, so well intended, but also just really angst ridden.
We were laughing about this the other day. Some friends at one of my kids' flag football practices, and a couple of the younger kids kind of got in this little scuffle, and we're all like, should we jump in? Are you going to jump in, or we just let them fight it out? And I laughed and I was like, do y'all remember like just playing in the neighborhood when we were little, like outside? Like there was no mom coming out to be like, oh, like you don't do that. Like you just figured it out, And so I do resonate with that idea of, we're just in this generation where it feels like almost over-parenting or overprotecting, and you're just trying to do what's best for your kid, but everywhere you turn, you feel like I'm making the wrong decision.
So if you think of this idea that there's enormous amplification of falsehoods around vaccines, coupled with a, warranted or unwarranted, whatever you want to say, a rising distrust of government, there's been increased sort of distrust of big pharma, which we've talked about. Vaccines really shouldn't be thrown in with medications in that way. And then this idea of intensive parenting, of really sincerely and earnestly leaning in and wanting to make the single best decision for my child. So that's
the perfect storm.
That's sort of the context. And then you have sort of opportunistic putting out of information that is preying upon these parents. And so anyway, that's the best I can see, sort of a little bit of the situation that we're in. And that's why these things resonate.
Okay, let's talk through some of the adolescent vaccines. Yeah. We've done a lot of the childhood ones. I don't know that we've done all of them, but a lot. Tdap. Let's start with Tdap. Why is it a big T? Yeah. Talk me through it.
Tdap, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis again, whooping cough. These are boosters. And so in each of these, the immunity, you got vaccinated as a younger child, but it wanes. Not true of all vaccines, but it's true of a number of vaccines. And so you have to be boosted. So this is kind of the classic booster shot. This is like the poster child booster shot. And so it's the reason to do it is almost simply that the immunity wanes, that these diseases that were worth immunizing for in childhood, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis, they're still worth immunizing for in adolescence. It probably is worth highlighting pertussis because a lot of the reason for the increased pertussis cases is probably young adults whose immunity has waned, and they're getting pertussis, and they don't get potentially fatally sick like an infant does, but they get a lingering cough that can kind of look like a lot of other teenage illnesses, respiratory illnesses. And so then they can spread it to those who haven't been able to receive their vaccine yet, young infants. And so which is also the rationale with, or somewhat the same rationale with giving Tdap during pregnancy. And so waning immunity, needing to be boosted, Tdap. And again, it's one that if someone says, do you think it's a good thing? I'd say absolutely. It's recommended. It is required. And so there have been people that as they're entering 7th grade, they're looking at the vaccines that are recommended at 11-year-old, and they're like, well, definitely give me the tetanus. But then there may be some of the others that we'll get into, like, well, I'm not sure about that or that. And, I'm thinking.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah.
Like, I never, anybody questioned tetanus.
Right.
And I'm like, the relative risk, I'm just like,
but I think a little bit of what it speaks to is the power of mandates.
Absolutely.
That really what shifts the curve as far as public health is when things are required.
Right.
And so,
social media, like popularity of topics. Also, I feel like MMR and, autism and varicella and all of that, like nobody's talking about Tdap on social media. Right. And so it sways opinions. And so anyways.
Yeah, Tdap's just smiling as it goes below the radar.
Everyone's getting Tdap. Meningococcal.
So 2 different vaccines, but really I think it'd be simpler to lump them into one disease entity, which is meningococcal disease. So it causes meningitis and causes sepsis, blood infection, overwhelming systemic blood infection, and just a truly devastating.
Super fast, usually.
Super fast. It probably about I think 30% mortality rate. And even if you diagnose it, right? I mean, to your point, from time of onset of symptoms to death, sometimes like 14 hours. And of those that survive, like 20% permanent disability, whether it's loss of limb or loss of hearing and things like that. So there's some teenage vaccines that it's really almost just a quirk of vaccine development that there's 5 serotypes that cause most of meningococcal disease: A, B, C, W, and Y. And developing a vaccine for B was much more challenging. And so the ACWY was developed and has been used for quite a long time. And it's given at 11, then again at 16. And then more recently, meningococcal B vaccine, they were able to figure out a way to develop an immune response without the risk that they were worried about based on some really deep microbiology stuff.
But again, another example that they waited until
Correct.
They were ready and knew it was safe and effective.
Yeah, so. No, it's and so that those are given during teenage years. The one is given at 11 to 16, the other one is given at 16, and then a second dose.
Booster. Yeah,
and so this disease is common during teenage years and especially college settings.
Right, dormitory years and things like that. Yeah. Another one you don't see a ton of pushback on, but it's just interesting.
No, not a ton. I mean, one thing that is maybe worth mentioning is because this gets into even some of what we talked about: approved, recommended, required. Meningococcal B is one that is recommended to be shared decision making.
Right. Not technically required.
Yeah, or recommended. It's kind of this idea of making the decision with the family, because is the disease common enough to warrant? But if someone wants it, they certainly should be able to. Such a devastating disease, and it probably just speaks a little bit to the complexity of the way these things are recommended. But so anyway, so that's the adolescent meningococcal situation. There's probably a good chance that a lot of meningococcal B disease actually occurs in infants, and so you certainly could imagine that a vaccine being studied in infants to try to prevent that terrible disease in the young, but currently it's not. And again, there's a vaccine for meningococcal B, and it's not being given to infants because of this cautious diligence. And so the idea that there's this flippant vaccine
it's
is
just not true.
No, it never has been.
Let's talk about a super fun one.
Yeah.
HPV.
HPV, human papillomavirus. primary cause of cervical cancer and many other cancers.
But my child's not sexually active, Dr. Middleton.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be till they get married.
Yeah.
So why do they need this?
Yeah. So HPV being a sexually transmitted disease, it is only effective, like maybe all vaccines, but if given prior to exposure,
right,
is one aspect. And then the other is the immune it's preventing cancers that occur a couple decades later, often. And so the immune response is stronger and longer lasting when given younger.
I think that's a huge point not to skim over too, that it's not just before exposure, but that the immune system it's shown that it lasts longer and is a more effective response when it's given at a certain age. So it's not just that we're saying, oh, well, one day, in the next couple high school years or whatever,
it's coming.
Right. It's that scientifically this is going to protect them longer and better for their, adult life.
Yeah. And HPV is, it really should be almost in the Hall of Fame of vaccines. It's, you're talking about hundreds of millions of doses that have been given, and the incidence of cervical cancer in places that have really embraced widespread adoption, most notably Australia, I think Britain as well, but it has dramatically decreased cervical cancer. And sadly, a lot of the other HPV cancers seem to be rising, whether it's oropharyngeal and some others, and these happen in both male and female, and it's a preventable cancer with a very effective vaccine. It is one that, for a variety of reasons, I think a lot of people wonder about: is it necessary or is it safe? But we'll sometimes contrast it with at 11, there's tetanus, there's meningococcal disease, and there's HPV. And just looking at disease burden, whatever small number of cases of tetanus, and we don't want that to reemerge, but it's pretty small risk to kids as long as we maintain numbers. And meningococcal disease, devastating when it happens, but still you're talking about relatively small number of cases, as tragic as they are. HPV, it's about 40,000 cancers every year.
Tons.
Yeah, and about probably 7,000 fatalities every year in the U.S. And they say one in 4 adults get HPV, and like every year, 14 million new cases or something.
I mean, it's huge numbers.
And so, just thinking about what does it look like to steward, as a parent, to steward our child's health well, just this flash forward to the future, whether it was one of my own grown children, one of my own grown children's spouses, and like, why did you not?
Yeah, I think we've talked about that before.
Right.
Like imagining if your child came back, like, Dad, why did you not?
What were you thinking? And so anyway, it's one again that has been dramatically effective, and really a great addition. I mean, preventing cancer.
Families often will ask, would you do this for your child? And I'm like, not only did I get it, I will give it to my child. I'll recommend it for your child. That we live by what we are practicing in the office too, Yeah,
and we're really transparent about that. I mean, that's come up a ton with, we won't get into it, but questions as it relates to COVID and COVID boosters and
would
and
never
other
recommend
things.
something that we wouldn't do for our own children.
And actually never, I probably should ask my kids permission, but never hesitate to share what we've done with our children. I mean, that, as I think about it,
Sorry, Middleton kids.
It's really, it's their medical
no
record,
choice.
not mine. But anyway, it's something we have no hesitancy in sharing. And I think that's part of the trust relationship. We're trying to be honest and transparent with families so that they can be in a relationship that they trust and try to make the best decisions.
I don't know that I have anything else for this episode. I hope when I'm looking back at all three together, I just hope that not only our families, but people that watch, the podcast just feel added confidence in going to their medical providers, pediatrician, feel educated in resources that they can go to online, just that the conversation will feel open and that we can just talk about it more freely.
It is so important, and sadly, it's become so challenging to get good, reliable information. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. And hopefully this can be a resource for families that way. But I will go back to something we said earlier. In some ways, even more than being thoroughly and convincingly informed, I really want people to look for what they deem to be trustworthy sources. Yeah, it's just that I feel like that has to be the starting point for making decisions such as this and others. There are so many difficult decisions as a parent, and this should not be one of them.
You've said that before, and I love it. I think it just gets to the heart of it. It just shouldn't be one of them.
Right.
And there's so many difficult decisions. But
Yeah, the loving thing towards my children and the children in our community is to do this. And I want parents who are inclined that way to be able to feel the confidence that is there.
Right.
And I think essentially most of our parents are.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming
Thank you.
along this journey.
Thanks for inviting me to your show.
You're welcome. You'll be seeing a lot more of me.